right now on the air or on Facebook as far as that goes. And it's good to see everybody. My name is Martin Luecke. For those of y'all in the audience who don't know who I am the chair of the Climate Crisis Committee of the Windsor Park Neighborhood Association. And I'm joined here as a co-host with Barrett Sundberg.
Martin, it's good to be here. We have a full slate today and a list of questions for our panel that come from several Austin climate change organizations.
Yeah.
First, let's meet the panel.
All right. First on the list, Katharine Hayhoe. Dr. Hayhoe is an atmospheric scientist, a professor, and a director of the Climate Science Center at Texas Tech University. She is listed as one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people and Fortune's 50 world's greatest leaders. Not a small thing. Her study of atmospheric climate change gave her a lead role in writing the U.S. National Climate Assessment and was featured on the Emmy Award-winning documentary, The Years of Living Dangerously. She also serves on panels for the National Academy of Science and many other professional organizations devoted to climate change research and communication. Welcome, Dr. Hayhoe.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers. Barrett, you want to introduce our other panelists?
Yes, Dr. Juli Berwald, your next book is about coral and the business of survival. What is happening to coral now, and what can we expect in the next few decades?
So the oceans have already warmed by about 1 degree because of climate change, and coral live very, very close to their thermal tolerance. They can handle about 2 degrees of warming before they start what's called bleaching, which means that, well, it's really cool actually. Coral are solar powered animals. They have algae that live in their tissues that provide about 90% of the energy that they need to live. And but unfortunately, when the oceans warm by about 2 degrees, which is projected to be between around 2040 and 2050, the algae leave the coral's tissues, and that causes the coral to weaken a lot because it's suddenly not getting fed the sugar that it's used to getting fed, and they can die if it goes on too long. So coral bleaching has been happening more and more, and mass bleachings have been happening more and more. They never really happened before the 80s, and now they're happening almost every year. The Great Barrier Reef had its most extensive bleaching this year. And if the coral reef ecosystems die, they support about 1/4 of the marine species, and the protein from coral reefs feeds about 500 million people. It's their primary source of protein. So, climate change could be quite devastating, not just for the coral and the animals that it supports, but for people on land as well. And unfortunately, a lot of reefs exist in places where poverty is an issue. And so disproportionately, this will affect people who are already struggling to survive. So climate change, it's real. It has this, the coral reef ecosystem could be the first great ecosystem in the world to fall because of climate change. And it's not that there's nothing we can do. I don't want to say that. It's dire, but there's so many good ideas out there. There's so many solutions available to us. And I can talk about those maybe after everyone else is introduced, but that's kind of where I've been with the coral reef story.
Great. Yeah, we failed to introduce our other two guests here. We've got Julie Oliver here, who is running for United States Congress in our district here in Windsor Park. Julie is a former Medicaid mom and a healthcare finance expert running an aspirational 100% PAC-free campaign for U.S. House of Representatives, which is in District 25. Julie serves her community and volunteer board positions at Central Health and Div Inc. What is Div Inc?
It's a diversity incubator. So it provides opportunities for people of color and women to have to start their own businesses.
Also, you've got a law degree from UT, and you live here in Austin.
I do. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, brilliant. Introduce Louisa for us.
All right. Louisa, there'd been a lot of student strike actions last year. Louisa McDaniel is a senior at the Liberal Arts and Science Academy, LASA, of Austin. She's helped to organize multiple climate strike events and is currently working on a project with the Sierra Club. She plans to study economics in college.
Yeah, tell us what you're up to right now.
Yeah. I'm one of the student organizers with the Austin Climate Coalition, which is a student-founded, student-led group here in Austin. Right now, we're kind of working, we had a lot of big strike actions planned for this year. Obviously, none of those could happen, but we're working on really kind of building a bigger base in town. So we just launched a podcast, One World, Our Coalition, and we're working on building a bigger blog and kind of more of a network. So you can find us on Instagram at Austin Climate Coalition. And then I do believe we're also at austinclimatecoalition.com. We're open to everybody as membership, but particularly students.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Dr. Hayhoe, you're an atmospheric scientist. Give us a rundown of what's happening with atmospheric science right now and for the next few decades.
Well, we've known since the 1850s that digging up and burning coal back then and natural gas and oil now is producing heat trapping gases. These gases are wrapping an extra blanket around our planet, and that's why our planet is running a fever. So that is nothing new. We've known it for almost 200 years. Yeah. What is new is the pace of change. We are seeing things change faster now than any time in the history of human civilization on this planet. After the coral and after the polar bears, we are next. The planet will survive. The question is, will human civilization? And we're the ones who can answer that question because it's our choices that will determine our future. Will we continue to depend on fossil fuels or will we transition to clean energy sources? That question will determine the future of all of us, no matter where we live, no matter where we fall in the political spectrum, no matter what language we speak. We all share this home and we know that we're all affected by climate change. So to care about climate change, you don't have to be a Democrat or a liberal. You don't have to be a scientist or an environmentalist. You only have to be one thing, a human. And as far as I know, we are all humans. So that means that we all care by definition, even if we haven't connected the dots.
Well, you just said something where I don't think people really understand this. All of the climate models that have been made for the last few decades have all basically come true, except for one part, the speed at which it's going to occur. And now we're starting to realize, and the science is starting to show that it's happening much faster than we ever thought it would. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's growing exponentially as we all are starting to see. Is it going to be summer in Austin forever? I mean, what's going to be happening in Texas?
Well, there'll still be summer, winter, spring, and fall, but they are all going to be warmer. And what's happening in Texas, I'll tell you, is pretty specific because in Texas, we're known for our wild weather. I live in Lubbock, and Lubbock actually won the official competition for the craziest weather that the Weather Channel had a few years ago. So our weather, so anywhere you live, you have, hot and cold, wet and dry. And if you live in Texas, you have hot and cold and wet and dry. But what's happening as climate changes is our natural variability is getting stretched. So we're seeing more heavy rain events, but then we're also seeing longer, hotter, dry periods in between. And none of that is good for our water supply or our agriculture or our cities.
Yeah. Dr. Berwald, are you seeing the numbers increase in like ocean temperature or circulation? I'm sure there's lots of indicators there.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. The ocean is interesting because, about 4% of our funding goes to studying the ocean. So our oceans are sort of systemically understudied. But yes, there's natural variations, there's natural oscillations in the ocean. One of them you might have heard of is called El Nino or ENSO, El Nino Southern Oscillation. And so that used to bring warm water to places like coral reefs. And so during El Nino, you could count on maybe coral reef bleaching. But now you have El Nino on top of an already elevated temperature. And so that's causing accelerated bleaching events. And in fact, now temperatures are hot enough that you don't even need an El Nino to cause bleaching events to happen. So it is, like Dr. Hayhoe said, like it's like a craziness on top of a craziness, and it's affecting the ocean as well as here on land.
So, Julie, Oliver, we have a kind of crazy climate going on in our politics as well. I mean, I don't think the irony is lost on any of us about all these factors all coming to a head. 2020 seems to be literally the linchpin year of, I don't know, humanity.
Yeah, indeed.
What can we do politically? It just seems like there's such loggerheads here, and the bill is about to be due to be paid.
Well, you know, what's so interesting about this, and you know, Dr. Hayhoe said that you don't have to be a Democrat or a Republican to acknowledge that climate change is real and that it needs to be aggressively tackled, right? And we had a Republican governor who, in George Bush, like him or hate him, connected West Texas, where the wind energy is, to the grid. He was not considered a progressive governor by any stretch of the imagination, but he was at least forward looking enough to see the writing on the wall, and probably some of the cyclical nature of the oil and gas industry. I mean, right now we've had 50,000 people who've been laid off in the oil and gas industry just this year alone when the price of oil went negative. So probably could see the cyclical nature of oil and gas as well, and decided, well, the wind is blowing all the time. And we really have this incredible opportunity to keep Texas at the center and the leader in energy, but it'll be a transition to green energy. And that is what, to me, is incredibly exciting. You know, in the political space, we subsidize the oil and gas industry, and we subsidize it to the tune of about $650 billion. And I know that if we take that $650 billion in subsidies and plant it over in the renewable energy space, we can achieve some of these goals that we have, that we know we have to meet in very short order, like carbon neutral by 2030, 100% renewable by 2035. And Julie and I at least are on the same page about this, you know, having a carbon fee and dividend, which puts consumers in the driver's seat. You know, you're going to pay, if you want to consume carbon, great, you're going to pay a premium for it, because that carbon consumption is destroying our planet. That carbon consumption results in billions of dollars of economic damage annually to our state in hurricanes that hammer our coastline, or in these extended periods of flooding and then drought. So our farmers and ranchers are having a harder time. So we end up footing that bill as Texans. And a carbon fee and dividend will put the consumer in the driver's seat. So I think there are a number of things that we can do. I wish it wasn't such a politicized issue. I really do.
This a fee always sounds like it's going to cost money. What is this dividend part of the fee and dividend idea?
Well, great question, Barrett. Well, a carbon fee truly is a price. It's a premium on the purchase of carbon, but it is a revenue neutral fee, meaning all of the revenue that is collected from that fee is dividended out to every household equally, in equal measure. So if you have a 5,000 square foot home that the AC is on all the time and you're connected to a coal power plant, you're going to pay a premium for living in that home. And you're going to get a small dividend that everybody else gets. If one of your neighbors puts solar panels on their home, they are not using anything off of the grid except occasionally, they're going to be making money off of the carbon fee and dividend. So again, it puts consumers in the driver's seat.
So
Now,
go ahead.
well, yes, I love the carbon fee and dividend. One interesting thing, I've been listening to a lot of talks about the ocean lately, and in Europe, in other countries around the world, you know, COVID has really been really hard on a lot of all economies around the world. But one thing that's really on the table in many places is a green recovery. And I think that this idea, like we have to come back from, we will come back economically from what COVID has brought us. But if we can integrate some of these ideas about how to be address climate change in this recovery, we could really make some steps forward. And I think that's a great thing to put on the table as part of the conversation.
Yeah, Katharine, you are known for being fairly conservative, and in terms of your politics. I actually don't know what they are, but
I'm Canadian.
You're Canadian, fairly Canadian. I'm sorry, conservative. My fault.
Yes, Canadians don't identify as belonging to a party because we don't have to register to vote in the primaries. There are no primaries. So Canadians are very different than Americans. We don't, we're not born Republican and die Republican, or born Democrat and die Republican, or we don't like change parties halfway through our lives. We have 5 different major political parties in Canada. And depending on the issues, it's very common, and I've done this myself personally, to vote for multiple parties in different elections at different level. And it's a much more healthy approach, to be totally honest, because then you're voting for what matters and who has the best position. And so we just had a federal election last year. And there is the whole spectrum in Canada, but every major party had a climate plan. Every major party, even the Conservatives, which are very conservative, they had a climate plan. It wasn't a great one, but but it was a plan, and that's a great start, to even just have a plan that says, yes, it's real and we should do something about it. I realize it's a low bar, but believe me, right below the low bar right now.
Right. Well, at least there's a bar. So, I feel like in America, we don't even have that at this point.
Well, I know, and they've tried carbon fee and dividend is in place, right, in British Columbia.
Oh no, we've got a national price on carbon. Yeah, they put it, so the whole idea of putting a price on carbon and then giving the money back to people in their taxes, and then also possibly reserving a little bit to pay for efficiency programs and public transportation and services like that. So British Columbia, the first province in Canada to have it, put it in place in 2007. And then by 2017, Alberta and Ontario and Quebec had it too. And the 4 provinces that had a price on carbon led the country in economic output. So their economy grew with the price on carbon. British Columbia had the lowest personal income tax rates and some of the lowest corporate income tax rates in all of North America, not just Canada. And now there's a federal price on carbon that was introduced by the centrist party, which is ironically called the Liberals, but they're actually right in the middle. And that price has been in place since last year.
So how much are people getting in these dividends, and does it change from year to year?
It depends on the price. So you start the price low and then you ratchet it up. But I think even in the first year, the average Canadian household was, I really should know this number off the top of my head, but I'm going to say it was either $1,200 or $2,400. It was one of those.
That's a lot.
That's
so
significant.
If it's adding a few cents to the price of gasoline or something, petrol, whatever you would call it, then you're getting that money back in your dividend unless you're really spending a lot.
Exactly. And even in Alberta, which Alberta is the Texas of Canada, it's where all the oil and gas is, they had a price on carbon. And there's a lot of people who really hated it because they worked in the oil and gas industry. But then because they kept 1/3 of their revenue back for efficiency programs, when people went around saying, hey, insulation, light bulbs, energy efficiency audits for your home, everybody loved those. Who doesn't want a free audit that will actually save you money?
Right.
City of Austin is doing that to a certain degree. But I think a lot of it is based upon need. But it does make you really think about it. And I think that's part of the deal, is that we need an education system that teaches us how to actually approach all this, to be able to understand the things that we can do. I mean, Louisa, you're in high school right now. Do you feel like you're learning anything about any of this in high school? Are they even talking about it?
Not nearly as much as I think we should. I've grown up in Austin, and yeah, I've had a pretty good experience with the Austin public school system. And, I think I've gone to schools that are more progressive leaning than most. And still, none of us know how taxes work. None of us. Nobody gets taught how taxes work, which is just a fun quirk of the American education system in general, I think. But no, and that's something that the Austin Climate Coalition is really kind of pushing for, especially as we move forward, is how can we make sure that, you know, students in Austin get that education. And at this point, we're more trying to focus on taking a direct approach. So how can we get these resources out to kids our age in the city, not really going through the school system, because that hasn't been super effective in the past.
Well, and a recent review of every state's climate change curriculum, which one of our former doctoral students here at Texas Tech helped in with the National Center for Science Education, they gave Texas a failing grade.
Okay. No surprise there.
Yeah, I
Let's-
think with the climate change education you get, it's either nothing or very doom and gloom with no path forward and no actual nuance.
That's part of the reason why we're having this conversation, is to talk about the path forward. And I think that our committee has discovered a path forward that I would like to talk about a little bit right now. Barrett actually was the person who first discovered this, but there's a guy named Saul Griffith who is a McCarthy Genius Grant recipient, who's a physicist and an engineer, and he really took the entire energy industry information for America, compressed it, and then analyzed what we could do with it. Barrett, you know a lot more about this. Basically, he asked two questions, right?
Yeah, there's a website called Rewiring America, and it discusses this. You can download a 85 plus page description of this. Martin and I have been reading through it. Dr. Griffith was the one who worked through all of the information, and his first question was, what can we do physically using technology that we already possess? Everything proven. What can America do towards reaching the international climate goal of limiting the increase in temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius? And then what is it that we would have to actually do? What path of action would we have to actually follow to actually meet it? So can we do it, and how would we do it, were his questions. And basically, the plan that he outlines is essentially a sort of a very large mobilization, a kind of a World War II level major historic effort for about 3 to 5 years to kickstart a very complete electrification of the American system, of everything from cars to houses to industry, so that we would drive with his conclusion, as he worked through what his method was, to figure out, what if we did the best available thing, but things that are already proven? And his conclusion is that we would end up with an energy system that's actually cheaper than what we have now once we make the initial investment. And he believes that most of the money would actually be able to, ordinary people would, since we would be saving money, we could do it if there was basically government backing for a lending program. So just like you might get a loan, a government-backed loan to buy your house, if you get a government backing on the loan to buy an electric car, our next car could all be an electric car. And with methods like that, we could end up electrifying the entire country. And in the end, by having a simpler, physically more efficient system, we would end up saving money once we make that initial investment. And
The question is, do we have the political
that each of you
power?
can bring your perspective to this and what the possibilities might be, what your responses would be.
Well, if you don't mind, is it okay?
Go
if I
ahead.
go first? Okay. Unfortunately, I have to go at 6:30. I'm so sorry, because this is an awesome discussion. I'm loving it. I'm going to come back and watch the rest of you guys talking when I'm not here. So nobody leave, please. Just stay.
Okay.
So I think this is fantastic. And I just gave Drew a link to a short video on Saul, actually explaining this that the Years Project did, which is fantastic. It complements a study that came out last September, so a year ago. It was by the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, and they found that the US could reduce its carbon emissions 50% through electrification and efficiency, just efficiency, which means we save money, right? Because efficiency is using less. So we all save money. There's only one sector that doesn't save money, and that's the energy sector, because people need less of it. So you're absolutely right. This is something that can be done. It is not rocket science. We have storage options. I saw there was a question on Facebook asking about storage. We already get 20% of our electricity from wind here in Texas. And we already know that we have a natural storage system between the coast and inland, because when it's windy in one place, it's less windy in the other, and it goes back and forth. But batteries plus solar are now cheaper than natural gas in many places in the US. So that storage plus solar is cheaper than natural gas. Solar itself is now the cheapest form of electricity around the entire world in developing countries as well as in the US. And there's a lot of other ways to store energy, including some that they're exploring right here in West Texas, which is pumping water up and letting it run down, very old school, testing batteries, testing other storage methods, and bringing other sources on like geothermal energy and tidal energy and things like that. So there's so much potential. It isn't rocket science. It's good for us. It cleans up the air. It cleans up the water. It reduces our own costs as individual people. There's really no reason to do it, except for the fact that the richest companies in the world are the companies who've made their money off extracting, processing, selling, or making things that burn fossil fuels. If I had to identify one big roadblock holding us back, it's simply that.
That's something that Griffith addresses sort of briefly in his comments, and he speculates that, well, there's a lot, when we really build a big effort, we need existing expertise in things like building infrastructure and energy distribution and the financing of large projects, and who has the management capacity to do large building projects. And the existing energy industry is world-class in all of those areas. His contention is that essentially, if we are paying the energy companies to make the transition instead of stay where they are, we ought to be able to reach a practical political solution as well as a practical technology solution, because we have the technology. I don't know if Julie or if any of you would like to address that possibility. Julie Oliver?
Yeah. So I was just taking some notes about some of the things that we can do, and in looking at some of the chats as well. I like to call it transition from the pipeline to the turbine. And the fact of the matter is we do have refineries where people are going to find themselves unemployed. We have people working on pipelines, but taking that talent and that skill set from the pipeline to the turbine. And in fact, Stanford University did a study that said if you put big turbines out in the Gulf Coast, you could chop up hurricanes and reduce the speed at which they hit the coastline, so they're not quite as damaging. And I love Dr. Hayhoe's point. We've got this alternating source of wind, at the coastline and in West Texas. So to somebody else's point, what happens when the wind goes, or you have a few cloudy days? What is your backup system? There are a number of options that we can do. We still have nuclear. Nuclear will eventually have to be decommissioned because it will be very, very costly in the long run. But we do still have nuclear power plants that can, in the short term, be that backup when you have those days of no wind, no solar harnessing. And then, somebody was talking about, well, what would you do about, carbon sequestration? Regenerative agriculture, I think, is a huge solution to that. But you're right, to everybody's point, it requires an initial upfront investment. You're going to have to pay farmers and ranchers to redo their agriculture practices. But in the long run, it will not only be better for the farmers and ranchers, it's going to create health in their land. We only have about 60 years, y'all, of good soil health, maybe. And once that is gone, we can't grow. We can't grow food. So regenerative agriculture practices are not only good for the environment, but it's also good for climate sequestration as well, or carbon sequestration. So I think there are a number of things, but it requires this initial upfront investment. But that is what, in my opinion, what the government's function is. Create that initial upfront investment that no private interest on their own could take on. And then we all benefit from that. And we have lower costs on the back end, much lower costs. What do I think it's going to take to get there? We have to have massive campaign finance reform. We need to stop allowing corporations to dictate to us who gets elected and what laws get passed, because their lobbyist, has the ear of a congressman or a senator. So we need massive campaign finance reform. And I could, in a quick blurb, I'll tell you, I think we need to tax corporate PACs and tax them 90%, so that we neutralize the effect of what a corporate PAC can do in the political space. They're tax exempt organizations. Take away their tax exempt status, tax them 90%, 10% might go to the intended recipient, 90% could go to a pool of publicly financed campaigns funding. And we have people who care about their communities, care about climate change, care about their environments, running for office and winning.
Dr. Hayhoe, I know you have to go, but I was hoping that you might give us a parting glance on what you are hearing here, what you think.
Absolutely. So Julie is so right. There's no one silver bullet to fix climate change, but there's so much silver buckshot. There are clean energy sources. There is efficiency. The cheapest energy is the energy we never use. There's smart agricultural practices that we're doing right here in Texas. At Texas Tech, we have a cotton growers program where they look at regenerative agriculture techniques to put carbon back in the soil where we want it, where it actually helps the soil retain water and grows better crops. And we even have a team of 6th graders here in Lubbock, Texas, that won a national science fair in June for their Carbon Keepers program, which was looking at how you put more carbon back in our soil to help our farmers. So that is a very Texas solution. Wind, sun, farming, all of that goes together. It's part of who people are here in Texas. And it just makes sense no matter who someone is from whatever side of the political spectrum. We all want a safe place to live. We all want a healthy economy. We all want cheaper energy. We also want clean air to breathe and clean water to drink. And so when you put it that way, which I think Julie's doing a great job of, it really makes sense to come together rather than focus on what divides us. And if anybody wants to know more about other great climate solutions, I'm going to put a link in the chat here to go to Facebook to Project Drawdown. Project Drawdown lists about 100 different solutions, including a lot of those ag solutions that we just talked about, and is fantastic. I highly recommend it. Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
Thank you for being here, Dr. Hayhoe. Really appreciate your time. And maybe we'll do this again in a few months. All right. So with that, we are going to go back to that. Okay. We have more questions. It's funny. I keep seeing Louisa really nodding on some of these things that I didn't know high schoolers would really understand. So when you were talking about a policy earlier, Louisa was like, "Oh yeah, I really like that one." I'm thinking, how do you know that? So I'm assuming that you're a unique individual in that you're really reaching out and trying to find this information. But are you all talking about it in high school amongst yourselves, or is this something that you're all sharing? How's that work?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that, and I think it may be sort of, the crowd I run with, since I do a lot of, climate change. I am very involved in kind of the climate change stuff. That's just sort of, a lot of my friends have similar interests to me. But even outside of like the group of people I hang out with, a lot of people my age are very aware of what possible solutions are out there. I think, almost as a coping mechanism, we're all like, is there still going to be Florida in 80 years? Like, let's really kind of latch on to all these possible solutions we can get. And I think it was reassuring at first to me when I learned about these plans. I know we had, Juli on the Austin Climate Coalition did like a live stream strike back in, I believe it was April. And we had Juli on, and she talked about the carbon fee and dividend plan, talked about the pipeline to turbine plan. And we were talking about it after, and we were like, you know, none of us knew that there was this pretty clear-cut, very implementable plan that, you know, created more jobs and fit in with the culture of Texas. And I think, but the more we looked at it and the more we observed what's happening right now, it became a little bit scary, because you realize that the reason we're not working on this issue isn't because there isn't a solution, because there is. It's because none of us are coming from, you know, we're all people aren't working off the same operating principles anymore. And I think that's unfortunately what's going to make this mobilization effort so different from World War II, which is the comparison that was in the Rewiring America field manual, which I think is a great comparison, but unfortunately, I think it's much more similar to COVID-19, especially with how politicized the issue is, where, you know, unfortunately, if we all aren't accepting the same basic set of facts, so if we all aren't accepting that climate change is real, if we all aren't accepting basic principles about how the economy works, we can't implement these solutions. And, you know, that's one of the problems that I see with the idea of individual action to fix climate change. As much as I think we should all try to do what we can, you know, if you imagine the pandemic, but, you know, imagine there's the pandemic we have now, but only 1% of the population is choosing to wear a mask. And they, you know, you feel safer because you're wearing a mask and you're doing what you can. But because it's that small percentage that's doing that small thing, as good as the intentions are, it doesn't do a lot to help everybody else. And so ultimately, I think before we can implement these solutions, and, you know, I think campaign finance reform is a big part of this, because it'll get kind of that it'll help with the politicization and the propaganda. But I think we need campaign finance reform. We need to start talking about this in the education system. And ultimately, I think we need some sort of social reckoning that forces people to not only confront this issue, but to confront, I think, a lot of the larger social issues that contribute to that disconnect and that kind of, you know, just facts aren't facts anymore.
Yeah, the unfortunate turn of society into the fake news has derailed conversations. Julie, Oliver, how do we put this back on the track?
Well, we have a real opportunity to start this right now, actually, right now. Now through November 3rd, we have an opportunity to elect people who actually do care about this. What I keep telling people is, it doesn't matter if you believe in the science or not, it's going to happen. Science doesn't care if you believe in it, it's going to happen. And we can actually do something about it. We see effects of climate change. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't take a scientist to tell you that we are having devastating hurricanes that do so much damage. The western part of the United States is on fire. We do have more severe droughts and flooding. Ranchers and farmers in Texas know this. They know that climate change exists. We see climate refugees coming to our borders from Honduras because they can't grow coffee crops anymore. Everything that we're seeing right now will be magnified and amplified if we don't put the brakes on this thing called climate change. And I mean, not apply lightly. I mean, press the brakes really, really hard. And you know, what I've discovered is that these people who have these positions of public trust, there's a tremendous amount of power that goes along with it. And there also, you know, a tremendous amount of self-serving that is going along with this, and getting rich off of going to Congress. We have to have people, and I tell people, look where the funding comes from. If somebody is running for an office, go look at their funding report. It's all publicly available, from city council all the way to the White House. It's all publicly available. And if you see things on there like PACs that are contributing to candidates from special interest industries like oil and gas, or health insurance, and when it comes to healthcare coverage, or you name it, banking and finance, when we have a mortgage crisis on the other side of this pandemic, look to see where the money comes from. How those people are going to vote. It's an excellent predictor for how people will vote. And I don't know. I think we have so many things we need to tackle, but until we take that on aggressively and say no more, we really do not have the tolerance to allow these people going to Congress who are just in this, small group, this buddies club of enriching themselves and giving each other these little high fives, while they get richer. And they say things to scare us, like, oh, that person's going to destroy your job. That person's going to destroy Texas jobs because, she believes in the Green New Deal, or that's not true. This whole thing that we are talking about is a jobs plan. It's transitioning to jobs of the future, because the jobs we have right now are most assuredly going to kill our planet in this generation. So,
and there's a disconnect too between what the actually the people want and what's happening, in our government right now. I think something like 73% of Texans see limiting carbon emissions as, they support it. So we're not being represented by people who are really representing the feelings that are out in the world. There's something about like young Republicans. I saw some data, like young Republicans, something like 78 of young Republicans want action on climate change. So there's definitely, there's a feeling, I think that there is, yes, we may not be teaching it in schools as well as we should, but I feel like there is an understanding among the population that is not being represented by what actions being taken about climate change, in our government.
I'll also say, Louisa is who gives me hope. Louisa and young people like Louisa, they have a real opportunity to start over, truly start over, and get rid of the nonsense that we have in politics. So when I look this can be really bleak if you allow it to be bleak, the political space, but where I find hope is in young people like Louisa who do care. When you found in Travis County during a runoff, one of the lowest turnout elections in the state, a primary runoff, that the largest group that turned out to vote were people under the age of 40 is remarkable. And the smallest group that turned out to vote were senior citizens. Louisa is who gives me hope. And the fact that she is teaching herself, she didn't get this in school, and she's teaching herself this. She's learning it. She has the ability to critically think and ask questions. And that is what gives me hope.
Pundits say there may be quite a bit of change in the political environment after November, but what actually happens remains to be seen. Supposing that there's a shift in which party has control of Congress and the presidency in this coming term, what are the short-term, the specific actions and legislative initiatives that you think should be prioritized in order to address climate change? Which things should we focus on first? Should we take a big picture and try and do Rewiring America, or should we focus on carbon fee and dividend? Is there a list, or should we start with what do you have? Where should we start in the immediate term?
Carbon Fee and Dividend Act has already been written, easy to co-sponsor and get pushed through. Seriously, it does. I say easy, but it's, it's already, the work on the act is done. But yeah, I think we have to do everything. I don't think there's one thing that takes priority over something else. But since that act has already been written, we can co-sponsor it. We get the number of votes that bring it to the House floor. Hopefully we have the Senate as well. I'm thinking very, very positive thoughts about November, and we actually have that to Joe Biden's desk and he signs it. But it's a number of things. It's, it's reinforcing our regulations around the Clean Air and Clean Water Acts. It's investing in those jobs of the future. One of the things that I would like to see, and I hope I can get a lot of support in Congress from this, is redeploying the men and women in uniform at Fort Hood when they retire. Fort Hood, by the way, y'all, is working on green energy initiatives, using that talent that's already there and creating a green energy economy right here in Central Texas with respect to solar. And we just, again, we need the political, you need somebody who can go and build coalitions to do this and get that funding. But I think for the men and women of Fort Hood, and, you know, looking at this as an opportunity to provide them real wages, living wages, it's skilled labor, high paying jobs with great benefits. This is something that I think can happen. And it doesn't need to just happen here. It needs to happen all over the United States.
Yeah, like Katharine said, it's not a silver bullet, it's a silver buckshot. And I think that once we get our mind around the fact that, you know, climate change action is something that can open the doors of innovation, I think we're going to see super cool things. Like, I know people in Austin who have come up with photosynthetic paint that sucks carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So you could imagine, you know, just storing carbon through surface coatings. There's a huge, I mean, Juli knows, there's Voltabox, which is a giant battery company in Austin that is making batteries that can move mining equipment, you know, and buses, like big things. So I think that once we start taking action on climate change, you know, the innovation will follow. And I think that's just super exciting, but we haven't reached, you know, we haven't been able to muster the political will to open those, to make those things economically viable yet. So that's where we are.
So we have this election coming up, and I think everybody's kind of on pins and needles about it, you know, because it could swing in a direction that really is bad for the climate. And you know, we have to be really honest about, you know, the fact that, you know, the White House has been basically against the climate for 4 years now, in actions as well as words. And one of my committee members asked the question, what happens if Trump gets reelected? And I ask you that question, what happens, dude? What happens to the environment then? Is it over? I mean, I know, Juli, if you're in Congress, you're going to be fighting like hell. But when you got the White House against you, man, you have to go overthrow the White House then, don't you?
Well, you know, who knows? I'm sure there'll be some impeachable offenses in 2021, 2022. I mean, probably day one. I mean, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. That's a terrible joke, y'all. But I don't know. I really don't like to live in that world of hypothetical, because in my mind right now, I'm so focused on Biden being the president and signing legislation that actually benefits the people in our country and puts us on the right track. It's hard for me to make space right now for another 4 years of Trump in the presidency.
Yeah.
I mean, also go ahead, Louisa, go.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I don't know if, I guess this is just a sense of where our head's at. You know, some of the other student organizers and I have had talks about, you know, what do we do if we just decide that we need to pivot and start doing, like, you know, an online class series about how to grow your own food and, you know, medical skills. And, you know, there have been kind of, you know, jokes, but not jokes about, well, you know, if we fail here, we can all just pitch in and, like, find a plot of land somewhere that isn't going to be underwater, and just, you know, Austin Climate Coalition, Austin Climate, like, sustainable farm commune to ride out, like, whatever happens. And so I think that's a little bit where our head's at, where, like, we have started entertaining the possibility, because unfortunately we're all probably going to be around for another 70 years, hopefully. We have started entertaining the possibility of, what if we just really have to pivot hard into a bad direction. But we also have been talking a lot about, and I know everybody here knows this, but, even if Biden wins, that is not a silver bullet, which I know everybody knows, but we are worried that some people will feel if that happens that, oh, we don't have to worry about it anymore. All the right legislation is going to pass. All the right things are going to happen. And there's fossil fuel money in the Democratic Party too. We would have to fight less, but it's still going to be a fight.
Well, put
Yeah,
up.
and I mean, the United States is the largest, source, has been the largest source of carbon dioxide emissions, but we have to remember it's global climate change. And so, like I was saying before, a lot of countries around the world are looking towards rebuilding their economies with carbon emissions in mind. And so we can start to pay attention to what other countries around the world are doing and try to support them in their efforts to limit emissions if we need to do that as well. It's
one question that came up since you're talking about different countries, and it makes me think of the interaction between all of us throughout the global ecosphere. Someone asked us about the news that disintegrating plastic bits on the ocean floor are making their way into the food chain. How do we approach something like that? How significant is that, and what should we be doing?
Oh, that's probably a topic for that's probably a different conversation. Okay. Plastic is made from fossil fuels, though. we should say, and yes, plastic pollution is everywhere on our planet. In the deepest trenches, we find it. It's definitely in food chains, and we probably even have eaten it in fish if we've eaten fish in some form or another. This is the problem, but it's kind of a different problem. And I think that staying focused on climate change is really the better thing to do in this meeting.
Yeah, because I really don't want to think about eating plastic.
Yeah, nobody does, of course. But it is in the same way, it is I guess maybe the thing to say is it is a global problem, and we all live on this planet together. So we're going to have to acknowledge our problems collectively at some point. We're not doing that yet, but these I would much rather live here than Mars. And so I think we need to start to recognize how important this planet is, and we are its great caretakers. We have influenced its chemistry now. We will leave our mark in its geology. We are a massive force on this planet as humanity.
Looking at what we actually have the ability to do, one of the things people have pointed out is if we do find the political will to take action in the 2020s and move rapidly forward, one possibility is that, say, to put it in simple terms, say Democrats get control of Congress and the presidency in this election, and they enact major climate bills. They enact carbon fee and dividend. They enact the Rewiring America plan. We do a big push. We get 3 to 5 years of momentum. There's all these build-out contracts. Is it realistic to think that once there's hundreds of billions of dollars of infrastructure to build, that the energy companies bid on it and start profiting to the point where by, say, 2028, even Republicans are supporting it because there's their own major donors benefit? Is that a realistic path? Julie Oliver?
Yeah, I honestly think that there is going to be a lot of money to be made in the renewable space. A lot of private industry, private money to be made in this space. And yes, it's not a Democrat versus Republican issue. There are plenty of Republicans who probably don't care at all for oil and gas. They might have other, right-leaning tendencies, but maybe oil and gas isn't part of that. Because I could say just because the carbon fee and dividend actually does have bipartisan support. It really does. And again, that's not the only solution. It's certainly not. It's one tool in our tool belt. But there is money to be made in this space, a lot of money to be made in this space. It is, and it's the right thing to do to move to the green energy economy of the future, for real. So I think you are going to get some Republicans in this space. Now, I think there perhaps could be some pushback eventually in regulating things. There's always pushback, it seems, or tension between what's the proper amount of regulation in a space. So who knows what that's going to look like in the future, but I definitely think that we can get there. We have a lot of work to do. I'm not naive to think that this is going to get done in 2 years time period at all. We have a lot of players in the world who don't want us to get off of our dependence on oil. A lot of countries that are not democratic countries that don't want to see us lessen our reliance on oil. So I don't think that this is going to be an easy task, but it is still one that is going to take a tremendous amount of courage, political courage. And that's what I like, what I'm seeing. The people who are getting elected right now are the people who have that political courage because they're not beholden to any of these interests. They're not. And we've seen it. We've seen, Democrats standing up to Democratic leadership. And that's encouraging. You're not seeing that on the Republican side, though. You're not seeing Republicans standing up to Republican leadership. There seems to be a lack of political courage. I think Juli may have written a book about this called Spineless. But so the more that we elect people who have this political courage and make themselves available to their communities, and so much so that they don't need that money. There's no need for that money to get them reelected because people know that their representative is going to go in and do the right thing. And that's not to say gerrymandering can't come along, and there are a lot of dirty tricks that people in power like to pull out. But I mean, who knows? We could keep going down the rabbit hole. What I like to focus on is what is the greatest good we could do right here, right now. And then tomorrow, what is the greatest good that we could do right here, right now? And just keep that mindset and live by it day after day after day. And what can I do in this? I can sign onto that piece of legislation, and I can go talk to somebody on the other side of the aisle. That is the greatest good I can do in this moment, right here, right now.
Do you think there are a lot of people to reach out to on the other side of the aisle? Would you say it's a majority?
I think in a post-Trump world, I think there could. Yeah, I think there could be. I think a lot of people. I do.
I am.
I hope.
I'm a former journalist. I have a long history of really watching journalism in America, and I think that the ball has been dropped by them on this issue, and only in the last few months or maybe half a year have they been actually being kind of more honest about the threat of climate change. But the media has really not helped in this situation. And I keep looking at it going, what can we do besides, of course, writing a book about it, like Juli has done, is doing, and continues to do. The problem is if the media doesn't talk about it, then nobody knows about it. How do we get past that particular wall?
Well, I want to push back a little bit, just because the New York Times has a climate forward page that they put out. You can every week. The Washington Post has been rather supportive of climate change news. Scientific American, has also published. There are a lot of articles. There's a lot of writing out there on The Guardian does a great job. There are a lot of people trying to write about climate change and the effects of climate change. I want to stand up for my writer friends who spend a lot of time pitching articles and trying to get articles out there.
Right.
Yes, is it hard? And yes, have I had pitches that have just sat on my desk because I can't get an editor who will pick them up? Absolutely. On the other hand, there are a lot of people trying to write and doing a lot of good writing about climate change right now. So I want to just kind of defend my crowd a little.
I have to leave. I'm so sorry. I have something starting right now.
Okay.
But thank y'all. Thank you, Martin, for putting this together. Juli, Louisa, Barrett, thank you. And Dr. Hayhoe, when you watch this when you play it there, thank you for being part of this. What a privilege.
So great to see you, Juli.
Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So, one thing I noticed, Juli, when you were defending the press there, it was all publications. There were no networks that you were talking about. The TV networks is really
Oh, I do want
more
to stand up for
issue.
KXAN. Like, there are some weathermen in Austin who have been really put climate change into their news stories and have been helping with that as well. So, yeah.
I think on a local level, yeah, as I say, the best journalism being practiced is only on the local level in reality, because they have to live next door to people, you know, and everybody knows you're the weatherman. So there's a certain amount of pressure on them to actually be honest. It's when you get to the upper echelon that I see this kind of drop off up until about a year ago. So what I'm saying is, it's not that they're ignoring it. It's more like it was just something that they didn't give the credence to it that was required. And I think now, as we're watching the coast burn and hurricanes just come down the bowling alley, just strike after strike after strike, you begin to realize as a journalist, we can't ignore this anymore. But it was mostly I'm thinking TV networks, because they reach such large audiences.
Let me ask a question that relates. Louisa, so, this media environment we're discussing, that's the environment you've learned everything in, and you're just on fire with this and very well informed. So where did you start learning about climate change, and what sources have you found to be helpful?
Oh gosh. I think the first thing I learned about climate change, I think someone's dad came and gave a presentation at my elementary school. Plug Maplewood Elementary. It's a great school. But yeah, I think that was the first I heard about it. I can't really define a certain point when I started hearing more about it. It feels like it's been a constant thing. Just because we did have that massive drought from the time I was about 3 to the time I was about 13. And I just remember when I was in like first grade, if it would sprinkle while we were at school, they would take us outside to play in it the way, kids in other states would go play in the snow. And so I think I was always raised with the idea that something was seriously wrong. I don't think I was ever, even once the drought sort of ended, I think you're kind of left with the belief that like something isn't right here. Because we really did. I'm sure y'all remember this. We got so close to running out of water here in Austin.
Yeah.
I think I started reading more about it and seeking out more media about it when I was in high school and when I was getting more into the political space. But I think this goes back to the question about media, where it's not really a question of whether or not there's reporting about it. There's been reporting about it in some shape or form, I think, since the 70s. The problem is who's reading it. If you are a far-right climate change denier, a New York Times article about carbon emissions isn't going to like come across your feed, and you're not going to be like, oh, they got me. This, I wasn't on this page, but now I'm there. And I know it's an even bigger problem with social media, unfortunately, because I know I've talked to people my age everyone my age pretty much acknowledges. I haven't come across anybody who's just flat out like climate change isn't real. But there are people who are like, oh, it's not caused by humans, it's not a threat. And I'll be like, no, it is. And they're like, what's your proof? And I'll show them the proof. And they're like, well, that's fake. That's a lie. And I'm like, well, it's Scientific American. And they're like, liberals. They're like, that's the liberal media. And I'm like, well, this is just because if the algorithms of all these social media sites, it's all confirmation bias. I see the things that reflect my views. Everyone else sees the things that reflect their views. And you can't really fault anyone for that. But yeah, I think the problem isn't a lack of reporting. It's who's seeing the reporting.
I think you're exactly right. Yeah.
Well, I wish that we could have a really large audience for this particular conversation, so that some amount of truth could sneak out into the ether. And obviously, when you have the environment that we have right now, the climate, the political climate that we have right now, you kind of wonder how in the world we're going to pull it together. I'm really curious now. How do we get people who are at loggerheads about this to actually stop doing that? Is there, I mean, I'm assuming some great tragedy is going to have to occur, basically.
I mean, I think the main key, I think coronavirus has been a good example. You've seen a lot of people who maybe denied it at the beginning, and then it's very sad that this has to happen, but were personally affected in some way and have sort of come around. And I hope that doesn't have to happen with climate change. I think it all goes back to you have to opt into those conversations with people that you come across who don't believe in it, because they may not, they're not going to listen to CNN. But if you're having a conversation with somebody and you are, treating their views with weight. So if they say, this is a hoax, ask, okay, why are they perpetrating this hoax? You have to work with them from where they're operating from. Like, you have to meet people where they're at. And I think that's a big problem on the left right now. You can't really just scream at people and call them stupid. You have to be like, all right, well, how your town was affected by this hurricane. Why do you think there have been 7 hurricanes this year? Do you want there to be 14 hurricanes next year? Mm-hmm. Like, you have to meet people at the personal level, I think, with an issue like this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about having conversations and not putting up walls. I mean, that's it. I mean, as Katharine said, the temperature, she said many times, the thermometer is not political. It's a tool. And so the problems are like divisiveness is really the huge problem. And we just need to keep talking to each other. It's our strength. It's our superpower, to keep having conversations, even difficult ones.
When we were talking, go ahead, Barrett.
I just wanted to applaud both of you for the approach each of you have taken to this issue. It's a big issue, and there's a lot of difficult work to be done, but you are doing it, and it's not the first time that humanity has faced a difficult problem, or America has faced a difficult problem. And, at first it's hard, but then, we may succeed. I remember seeing a documentary about people who were in the civil rights movement in the 1960s. And the interviews were, well, what was it like? Well, a lot of times it was simple and boring. And we would photocopy flyers and hand them out to people. We would do a lot of talking one-on-one. We would prepare protests like Louisa has been doing at the high school. And yet we look back and realize, wow, there were huge changes that came out of that. So I'm hopeful that these conversations can pay off. And I really appreciate both of you joining our conversation today.
Thank you
for having me.
Well, we were talking about, hope last night when we were talking about, how it is we approach this. And when we came upon the Rewiring America plan, that's when I started to really get some hope. When I saw it give structure to this idea of what we do, because it's such a large issue that we can't individually wrap our arms around it at all. We can't really understand what we can do except for on some personal level. And one of the things that we've been doing with the Climate Crisis Committee here is that we've been communicating through the newsletter, the neighborhood newsletter every month, things that you can do at home. And that's been the takeaway for us is let's just build on what we can do instead of what we can't do. And in that vein, we recently invented a device that we call the Windsor Park carbon shrinker, which is a basically a toolkit for understanding how it is that you can reduce your carbon footprint. We have a Facebook page, as a matter of fact, where we do this. We've put a spreadsheet on there where you can literally input your name, and then you have a choice of 10 different things that you can do that will reduce your carbon footprint. One of them would be, buy an electric car. And so in there, then you, once we start doing, adding the information in, and there's only been maybe a dozen of us who we just invented this, Barrett. How many people are in it now? Maybe 15 or so. And we've already, just through our own personal actions, we've already reduced our collective footprint by 49 tons. Is that right? And that was just a little bit of extra effort. So
that's what Katharine was saying about efficiency. Y'all, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to go as well.
Okay.
But yeah, efficiency is huge and personal actions are huge. But as I've heard Louisa say before, this is a systemic problem and we need big solutions. But thank you for putting this together. And it's great to see you all. And I'm gonna skip.
And
thank you so much. Everybody read Spineless.
Thank you.
Right. Yes. And I'm looking forward to your book in November.
No, it won't be out till next year. It's just due at the end of the year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, next year.
I see. You're on a writing project right now, aren't you?
I'm finishing it up.
All right. Well, fingers crossed.
Thank you.
You'll meet your deadline.
I hope so.
All right.
Bye, y'all.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye, Julie.
Thank y'all. Bye.
So I think we've covered it here. Barrett, you have any final thoughts?
Just thanks to everyone. Again, if you want to start registering your own contributions to the climate as an individual and you live in Windsor Park, go to Windsor Park Carbon Shrinker on Facebook. There's a learn more button, and if you click on it, it opens up, and there's a tutorial there. You can, if it's not obvious how to click through it, you can do that. If you live anywhere else in the world, feel free to copy it or improve upon it. And we'd be happy to demonstrate, share the code, so to speak, and move forward so that everyone can have their personal contribution and encourage their neighbors and open up a space for more conversations about these bigger worldwide and national projects that we need to do. So Louisa, thanks again for the leadership that you're already showing, and keep going.
Any final thoughts, Louisa?
No, I think y'all got everything. Thank y'all.
Sure. Well, we appreciate you coming in and being with us, and please keep in touch with what it is y'all are doing next, because
thank you so
we want to share whatever that is. I know that there are a lot of people in our neighborhood here who have kids at your high school, and because it's literally right next door to Windsor Park.
Yeah, well, if anybody wants to get involved, particularly high schools, but everyone else too, feel free to follow at Austin Climate Coalition on Instagram. DM us. We'll add you to the Slack channel. Super casual. There's not a lot of hoops to jump through. Just kind of jump right in, and we will get you involved. Bye. Y'all have a good one.
All right.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Bye,
the podcast.
Lisa.
The podcast. What's the name of that again?
It's One World, Our Coalition. And I think One World, Our Coalition. I think they just dropped an episode. It's my dear friend, Matthew Kim. Y'all have a good one.
All right. Thanks. All right. So with that, thank you all for whoever's left tuning in, if that's still happening. We appreciate you joining us tonight. And also, we're going to have more of these talks in the future. Our next one in December is the theme is going to be bringing hope to climate change for Christmas. Is that how we did it? Climate hope for Christmas? Is that what it was? And that's our theme. And we will send out a blanket of communications on when that will be and who will be on it. But it will be some local leaders who are going to be talking about what we're doing here in Austin and Travis County. If we can get Dr. Hayhoe back someday, then we'll do another one of those with her, and hopefully we can have a little more time with her so we can get more of opinion from her on some of these projects that a lot of people are really interested in. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough time to really talk about all of it. But Barrett, thank you. And with that, I think we're going to call it a night.
All right. Good night, all.
Good night, all.